Hello everyone, again, and welcome to the 15th annual meeting of the Special Interest Group on Harry Q. Bovik. We're live from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and several other locations that are all connected through the internet. Since 2020, Sigbovik has been known as the only online conference worth going to, according to a rankings website which our lawyers have discouraged us from naming. This year, we're again forced to host our venue online, which you can probably infer from the fact that you're watching this from the internet rather than the traditional auditorium at Carnegie Mellon University. I'm sure many of you are tired of attending virtual conferences by now, but hang in there because this one is going to be worth it. With that said, let's have our organizing committee introduce themselves, starting with myself. I'm Asher, and I'm the general chair and will also be serving as the MC, which I am told stands for Master of Chairs.
Hello, my name is Daniel, and as I'm temporarily located in Philadelphia, I've been designated Fresh Prince of Mod Chair.
Hello everyone, I'm Hannah. I am the other moderation chair.
Hey everyone, I'm Cindy, and I'm the conference chair. I'm currently in snowy Pittsburgh. Yes, it snowed today here.
Hi everyone, I'm Siva. I was the general chair last year, and I'll introduce our proceedings chair, Jenny, who is quietly lurking behind the scenes, running the show, watching and waiting. Let me say a few things on her behalf. So you can download the proceedings PDF from sigbovik.org/2021 to follow along. We'll give a page number and track name before each talk when there is a corresponding paper in the proceedings. And the proceedings are also available for purchase in print from Lulu, whose link is also at the website. Lastly, the 2008 proceedings are back in business after fixing a temporal discontinuity error. So if you're interested in collecting all the proceedings, you should definitely check it out. And now I'll hand it back to Asher.
All right, here's what we have in store today. First, we will have a presentation by our esteemed keynote speaker. Next, we'll have the talks. In both cases, we'll be accepting questions and providing answers. Then we will present our prestigious awards to their recipients. And finally, we will conclude the conference and virtually eat the traditional cake. You can find the full conference schedule at sigbovik.org/2021. And here's Daniel with more information on our Q&A format.
Thank you, Asher. So I'd just like to point out that after each talk, we will have time for some questions, but I want to talk about the ground rules. First, the moderation chairs will swiftly ban people using profanity or who are engaging in disparaging behavior. Otherwise, all forms of chatting are welcome in Twitch. All questions are welcome, and you can ask them in the chat. The appropriate protocol for this is to use the @ sign and flag a moderator, or to whisper to a moderator if you don't want to appear in the public chat. You can tell someone's a moderator because they have the sword next to their name. This is the same sword which will be used to forcibly remove anyone who attempts to disrupt the smooth operation of the conference. And finally, questions about the sword are considered unchivalrous and will be ignored. If you have any questions about how to ask questions, we ask that you please kindly submit them in a self-addressed stamped envelope to Harold Bovik at Carnegie Mellon University Official Complaints Department, located at 5 Million Forbes Avenue, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, Beverly Hills 90210. And with that, I'd like to give it back to Asher.
Thanks, Daniel. Let's proceed with the keynote. We've had some changes this year regarding the selection of the keynote speaker. As you all know, Sigbovik recently renewed its commitment to fairness by adopting an innovative triple-blind review process. This year, we've taken our commitment one level further by adopting a double-blind process for selecting the keynote speaker. Specifically, we chose the keynote at random from one of the slated talks just a few moments ago, and the speaker will not know of their selection until their keynote talk starts shortly after I'm done talking. Obviously, for the purpose of fairness, keynote talks were subject to the same requirements as normal talks. And the keynote speaker this year is Dr. Tom Murphy-7, PhD. He'll be presenting his work on uppercase case and lowest case letters. You can find the corresponding paper of the same name on page 122 of the proceedings in the typed track.
The following film has been ruined for Sigbovik. Did you ever get angry on the internet? If so, you probably used uppercase or lowercase letters to get the job done. Uppercase signifies anger or yelling. Lowercase signifies that you don't care, lol. It's also traditional to start a person's name with an uppercase letter. But what if I'm yelling and I want to show the proper regard for your humanity by capitalizing the first letter of your name? Then I want the letter to be upper-case. So that's what this video is about. Now, I only know of 26 letters, and so to make an upper-case and a lower-case version of each one is only O of 52 pickup. So in fact, I did it right here. I'll just draw all the letters. That took maybe 90 minutes. By the way, all of the fonts in this video, you can download them from my website. And you definitely should work these into your corporate PowerPoints and your school papers and so on. This is very important. But why do easy things by hand when you could spend weeks coming up with a super complicated automatic solution that doesn't work that well? So we'll train up a machine learning model on a bunch of fonts that learns how to turn an uppercase letter into a lowercase letter, and we'll be able to use that on lowercase letters to make them even more lowercase, and so on. So for training data, I went on the internet and downloaded all of the fonts, but then I had too many fonts, so I needed to go through all of the fonts and delete the ones that were stupid, or that were just drawings of dogs, or were broken somehow, or ones where the uppercase and lowercase letters are actually exactly the same already. In this part, I explained the training setup and showed you the UI and videos of it training. I then show off two fonts that are made. One is called Comic Sans, which is just hot garbage, and Futurda, which is a little bit recognizable. Then it's on to an even more complicated second version. For this one, I actually create two models, one that makes letters uppercase and one that makes them lowercase, and they generate training data for each other. At least that's the theory. It doesn't work that well. I ran this thing for like a month. At the encouragement of the Dark Wizard, I regularly fiddled with it. The Dark Wizard further encouraged me to build visualizations and tools to reinforce my superstitions. For example, this is either some generated image features, or bus seat upholstery, or a gram stain of the same. And these are weights from the last layer of the model, which I inserted partway through training. This started as the identity matrix, so you can see how it evolved some spatial relationships. Cool. Let's play with the models in this custom UI. In the center here, I can draw a shape. And as I do that, it's live updating the output of the model. I turn the drawing into a signed distance field. Then I run the make uppercase model on it, which gives me the uppercase version of that shape. Here it's pretty good, that's an uppercase R as expected. I can then run the make lowercase model on that thing, which gives me back pretty much a lowercase r. Not too bad. We can also just draw some weird shapes and see what their lowercase and uppercase are. That's the uppercase of that. Yeah, I guess I don't know what I expected. With this setup, I was able to uppercase Times New Roman to get exponential New Roman, and lowercase it to get plus New Roman, and so on. But what about lowest case letters? If we just keep running the model over and over again to make the letter more and more lowercase, it just kind of shrinks down and becomes this useless dust. And they all end up that way, with that same shape. So that's not that exciting. But if I keep iterating the uppercase model, I get more interesting shapes, and these don't just shrivel up. What happens is they all get caught in this loop. Could this eternal flame be the uppest case letter? The problem is, good luck printing this out. I mean, your paper will catch on fire. But these images remind me somewhat of slices from a Mr. I machine. So if we take this loop and stack some of these slices up, we could reconstruct a 3D object out of it. Here's a 3D stack of the letters LMNOP for comparison. As though there was a single letter that was all of them, which there kind of is, right? And now here's a 3D mesh of that uppest case letter, a nice 3D object. Well, first of all, we need to do a high quality render on the dry salt bed, so it can be at peace. And then what's the opposite of a Mr. I machine but a 3D printer? Oh my goodness, is this going to be the first time this thing actually makes its way all the way through a print? I'm not mad or disappointed. Oh, I broke it. Well, super glue. So there we have it, the uppest case letter. It's not bad. It's maybe a 2.5 on the Bristol stool scale. So now we just have to figure out how to use what we discovered. The lowest case letter, those 2 dots, hey, that's already on the keyboard. It's the ASCII eyeballs key. And the uppercase case letter, that's just about the right size to replace caps lock, of course. Just wait until I get angry on the internet. Thanks.
Okay, everyone, we are ready for a Q&A session. Now, I'd just like to note that our illustrious author, Dr. Tom Murphy-7, is present, and he will be answering questions live through a 6G 666 terahertz satellite link. And apologies in advance for any latency or subliminal messaging. Now, we'd just like to remind you that if you'd like to direct a question, please do so to the moderator or through whispering. All right, we've got our first question here from Jay Foxtrot, and the question is this work extensible to the middleist case?
I don't know anything about that. Yeah, that's not my field. We have to take this offline.
All right, we're ready for our next question. The next question here is, what computer hardware did you use to train the model?
I can't quite hear you.
The next question is, what about the well-known uppercase form of numbers, such as exclamation point or $sign?
Yeah, I did consider that, and I didn't do it, but it was my idea, and so you should credit me this. You could cite this answer, personal communication. Yeah.
Okay. And the next question is, will you use your fonts to improve language modeling?
Yeah, thanks. That's a really bad question that I hate, and I'm not going to answer it.
And the next question is, I noticed you only use Roman characters in training. Can this be improved by training on more languages? All right, and that's all the time that we have for Q&A, I'm afraid. Let me pass this over to Asher.
What an excellent and, above all, fair keynote. Let's now move on to the talks. First up is Neanderthal Recursion, Stone Tools as Paleolithic Central Unit Processors by Benjamin Afradi of the Recursion Lab. You can find a paper by the same name at page 260 of the proceedings in the definitely finite track.
Efrati. I am the co-founder of Recursion Lab, a research facility focusing on recursion studies. Today I'm going to be telling you about the paper I submitted for Sigbovik 21 titled Stone Tools as Paleolithic Central Unit Processors. As you know, prehistoric people did not have computers, yet their technology enabled them to process reality. This is a painting by Zdenek Burian, a Czech painter from the 20th century. As you can see, they have clubs, care for babies, play with skulls, they use fire, and they have stone tools with which they process reality. Their reality is basically animals and plants. They would hunt animals, take some plants, and do stuff. This is what I call processing reality. Here is how Neanderthals are represented today from an evolutionary perspective. Neanderthals and modern humans have a common ancestor. They diverged a long time ago. However, modern human beings carry some genes inherited from Neanderthal populations. This is the way archaic human populations were making tools. They would take a rock and sculpt it with another stone, hit it, take out bits of stone in an iterative fashion and make it kind of symmetrical. And this hand axe would be the core of everything they would do. They would scrape skins with them, break open skulls and bones with them. They would saw organic fabric. This is what Mark Moore calls the mindless process. Basically what he means is that what people would do at the time is pinpoint a rock and project their desired tool in that rock and then extract it from it. They would just iteratively hit the rock until it's ready. This is a hand axe, these are hand axes, and these are hand axes too. Flaking is different. Flaking is recursive. You take a rock, you prepare the rock, and then you make tools from it. So, just to make it clear, the big rock isn't going to be one central tool that's going to be useful for everything. It's going to be the matrix of all the tools you're going to make. For instance, blades, arrowheads, scrapers, everything would originate from the same core. But the same core wouldn't be all the tools itself. That's why I said, this is why I wanted to claim. This is why I thought it was possible to say that stone tools are central unit processors. Stone tools enabled people to process reality in two different manners, and these meant recursive or iterative processing. So this is how you go from one flake to another flake recursively. These are such flakes, blades and scrapers. These are also blades and scrapers, and here you can see how the flakes are getting smaller. At the end of the Paleolithic, stone tools were getting very small. Stone tools and central unit processors from today's computers are made of silicon. In order to process reality, humans have been using basically the same material for millions of years. Here is the romanticized vision of what a central unit processor is. It's a chip connected to the outside world with inputs and outputs. The memory is not inside the chip. It's another system altogether. There are also specialized chips, GPUs, audio processing devices. The central unit processor is the thing that computes everything and that centralizes data, but it's not the only thing that's active. Here is the way it works: electrical pins, heatsink. This is one of the first central unit processors. Microchips have had the tendency to shrink in size. Moore decided that it was a law that the transistor count in microchips would double every year. This is not a constatation, but a decision of the industry. So what can we do with all this? Today's gaming scene is divided into several trends, one of which is called retro gaming or paleo gaming. Paleo gamers are interested in old video games with very big pixels and very unpractical controllers, and you might wonder why they're resisting the graphic enhancement that's going on. Maybe our minds are still not adapted to playing Pong. Maybe human minds are suffering from this anachronistic experience, which consists in being constantly facing screens, manipulating things that we don't really understand. Populations had the time to develop slowly and then innovate and go on to something better and adapt the culture. So paleo gaming or retro gaming tells us a lot about how unadapted we are to the technologies we're using. People today are still nostalgic of what was happening 20, 30, 40 years ago in video games, and who could blame them, right? Because at the time things were so much simpler. Thank you very much for hearing me read the article. Bye.
Okay, and I would just like to inform everyone that Q&A for this talk is strictly prohibited by law. Asher, if you would kindly move us to the next paper.
Thank you for the enlightening talk, Benjamin. Up next is Macro-Driven Meta-Language for Writing Pyramid Scheme Programs by Marcin Konovalchik at Oxford. You can find the paper of the same name on page 227 of the proceedings in the Metaphysics track.
Hello, my name is Martin, and I will be talking to you about a programming language I have written. So you can see in front of yourself, it is called Pestle. And let me tell you how it came about. So this is a website called Cold Golf, and people pose coding challenges on it. You may know about it already. Basically, the idea is that you get given something that your program is supposed to be doing, and you want to write a program which does it in as few characters of source code as possible. So, in this case, someone asks, here, I'm going to give you a pile of brackets, and we want to flip them around until they kind of parity match. Okay, cool. That's really fun. Well, let's see. Oh, well, that's like, okay, 8 bytes, right? So this can be done in very small number of characters in some languages that are specifically for it. So that's in language called Jelly. Someone written it in J in 13 bytes. Someone has written in Python in 72 bytes. Python's quite verbose, but like this is still like really, really impressive. And then you keep looking through those answers, and there is those like try it online links. So let's try one of them. It says try it online, right? And yeah, so TIO is a website which actually hosts a bunch of interpreters for these languages. And so this actually, this is the Raku code, and it runs on the server. It gives you the answer, and you can switch to a bunch of different languages, and there's a lot of them. A lot of these are like esoteric languages, and so I've been looking through this like a year ago or so, and I found this as well. I found pyramid scheme, and well, pyramid scheme first of all sounds slightly dodge, but you have a look, and this is hello world example. So like, okay, cool. Is this a language? And yeah, that's a language. And so it's a language written by someone called Conor O'Brien, and it's actually a really cool idea where you basically just make those like little ASCII trees, and you put you put a bunch of keywords in them, and the whole thing is like 160 lines of Ruby. It's like really nicely written. And by the way, it has some really cool ideas. So this is an example of something called an EVST. Read my paper from this conference from Sigbovik. I recommend. It's really cool. The coding is really the ideas in coding are really cool. My paper is really cool as well, but right. So anyway, then I kind of went back to the Cold Wolf and said, okay, well, let's have a look for pyramid scheme on Cold Golf. And this is the question that Conor O'Brien themselves asked, where it was like, oh, well, look, generate pyramid scheme code, right? So generate these kind of like towers of negation for null pyramid. And you kind of keep scrolling through. It's like, oh wow, that's people have really answered in like lots of different languages. So then I thought that I will answer it as well. But then I thought I'll answer it in pyramid scheme. So this is it, right? So there's 8,400 characters. Answer, which is not the smallest, right? But it's using a slightly more verbose language, arguably. And spoilers, I haven't written this by hand. And this was written. This was code generated by my programming language. And so if you Pestle is also online, and it generates pyramid scheme. And so actually, let me show you. So this is the examples folder, and I'm gonna open the golf pyramid scheme negation, which is actually the answer to that very question. I should like put a link in here in the comment or something. And I can fire up a terminal, and I have like a little shell script which helps me run it. So I can say run me this little thing, and it compiles it. How many pyramids do we want? Hands up. Let's go for 4. Ta-da! 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, let's run it again, and let's give it 7 pyramids this time. Right, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Cool. Right, so it actually does the thing. And this is the let me turn off the word wrap. There we go. That's the actual pyramid scheme source code that I generated. And it's been really fun to make this, and it kind of taught me a lot about programming languages. So I recommend people like make your own programming languages. Like even on the side, you don't have to be serious. Don't get too attached to them because they'll probably be bad. But like, it's fun because it teaches you a lot about. I mean, my one is bad as well, by the way. This is not this is not judgment on anybody else's programming language. In fact, no, mine's gonna be bad. There we go. This is really fun. Programming language is fun. Have a play around with them. Cool. Stay awesome.
Lovely. So let's open up the floor to questions. All right, it looks as though the first question that we've received is, where's the audio?
So I think a good place to start would be David Beasley's projects called Sly and Ply, which are kind of Python-based projects about generation of programming languages, or of lexers and parsers for those languages. Anyway, and he also gives a fantastic talk on YouTube. In fact, generally, most of David Beasley's talks are an absolute blast. So yeah.
Yeah. And right, the second question is this an optimizing compiler?
Yes, sure. So I guess technically it's not. I mean, so the question was about the difference between a compiler and a transpiler, and isn't my language actually transpiled to pyramid scheme? And I guess sure, but like the distinction there is pretty gray anyway, because I mean there are some pretty good languages which actually just compile into C and then from C compile to bytecode. So it's pretty vague there. So I mean, like, sure, if you prefer to think of it as being transpiled to pyramid scheme, then no problem with that.
Right. The next question that we have is, do you plan to expand this into writing programs using the pay structure rules of multi-level marketing companies? Excellent question.
So yeah, I've mentioned the idea of the EVSTs. It's, I mean, have a look at. I mean, to be honest, I actually haven't mentioned it that much in the paper because currently Pestle doesn't support that. That is actually one of the things I very much would like to figure out how to do and put it into the language. I think it's actually quite computationally tricky because it very much changes the model of how the actual computation is represented and then executed. Yeah, like it's something to look into. If any of you have any ideas, then hit me up.
Okay, thank you. And our last question is, can one write a pyramid scheme compiler in pyramid scheme, thus making it a multi-level meta language?
No, okay, no. The programming language, so the Pestle is currently available only from GitHub, but I am planning on making it A, very easy to actually install from GitHub, and B, making it I don't know, maybe I'll have like a homebrew tab so that people can install it for homebrew easily. I kind of want to make sure that people can use it on different operating systems as well, etc. So no, I would actually like to go through the effort of making it easy for others to use. But also, I don't want to make it like too ridiculously complicated, because it's a fun joke language rather than something that I would actually want people to genuinely consider using in any real situation, if this wasn't obvious.
All right, and I'm afraid that's all the time we have for Q&A. Asher.
Great. For the next talk, we have data by Jim McCann at Carnegie Mellon. This has no associated paper in our proceedings.
Rodeo. Sparse non-parametric regression in high dimensions. 2006. Rodeo. A new method for planet-disk interaction. 2006. Rodeo. Robust de-aliasing autoencoder for real-time medical image reconstruction. 2017. Rodeo. Replay for online object detection. 2020. Cobra. Cobra. A combined regression strategy. 2016. Cobra. A fast and simple method for active clustering with pairwise constraints. 2017. Cobra. A framework for cost-based rewriting of database applications. 2018. Cobra. Data-efficient model-based RL through unsupervised object discovery and curiosity-driven exploration. 2019. Cobra. Compression via abstraction of provenance for hypothetical reasoning. 2019. Cobra. Context-aware Bernoulli neural networks for reputation assessment. 2020. Cobra. Contrastive bimodal representation algorithm. 2020. Rapid. Rapid. A fast, high-resolution, flux-conservative algorithm designed for planet-disk interactions. 2009. Rapid. A reachable anytime planner for imprecisely sensed domains. 2012. Rapid. Rapidly accelerated proximal gradient algorithms for convex minimization. 2015. Rapid. A framework for fabricating low-latency interactive objects with RFID tags. 2016. Rapid. Early classification of explosive transients using deep learning. 2019. Rapid. Rotation-aware people detection in overhead fisheye images. 2020. Data. Data assimilation for the detection and attribution of weather and climate-related events. 2015. Data. A large-scale benchmark and model for driver attention prediction in accidental scenarios. 2019. Data. Depth-aware domain adaptation in semantic segmentation. 2019. Data. Differentiable automatic data augmentation. 2020. Data. Deep adversarial data augmentation for extremely low data regime classification. 2021.
Wonderful. Well, I've just been informed that Q&A for this talk is impossible because the author is no longer capable of existing in physical form and has transcended to a being of pure energy. Asher?
Amazing meta study. Our next talk is going to be Critical Investigations on Avians, Surveillance, Computational Amorosities, and Machines by Brandon Bower and Connie Chow at Carnegie Mellon. You can find the paper of the same name on page 194 of the proceedings, and that not really biology, but closer to it than the other papers track.
We're here to bring you our critical investigations on avians, their use in surveillance and in computational amorosities, and general status as machines. Don't make me spell it out for you. If it flies, it lies. Now, why are we talking about this? Because birds, they're not all they're quacked up to be. Not only do we want to raise public awareness of the CIA bird genocide, as has been done by the Birds Aren't Real movement in great bravery, but we also want to bring to bear methods from computer science, such as formal methods for cyber-physical systems and human-computer interaction, in addition to perspectives from media criticism theory to help actually solve this great tragedy. And Connie's going to go into the related work and how it informed this choice of approaches.
Thank you so much, Brandon. Brave researchers from before our time have done much research on foul play unveiled for what it truly is. So part of our motivation is grounded in this related work that looked at other biomechanical structures that attempted to desensitize society to what true birds are and lead us to become none the wiser, including from left to right, we have the dapper bird, the thagoose, the orcagouin, and the most fearsome of all, the bird. We also look to a revolutionary research and earth-shattering discovery. An earth-shattering discovery by Kawasaki Satoshi. His incredible whistleblower work in translating the absolute absurdity of avian drones to human anatomy just shows us suspicious government involvement in their design. How could these horrific skeletal structures be real? There's no way. But now that we have prior work in our visual aesthetic and biomechanical design of quote unquote birds, we can discuss our approach and our research now. So we had an ethnographic study with a respectable member of the feline family where we followed his daily routine fending off avioid threats from his residency. And we also worked on a co-design workshop and developed 10 heuristics to help protect you when faced with a bird encounter. And now I'm going to hand it off to Brandon again to discuss our formal methods and computational approach.
Thank you for this brave research. In addition to these very practical everyday heuristics, we also wanted to do a foundational formal study, specifically using differential dynamic logic, a tool that's been widely used for cyber-physical systems such as drones, aka so-called birds. Now, once we built a model of a drone in differential dynamic logic, the natural next question is to see, is this what a bird is? So we took videographic data of what purported to be flight of a bird, or an avioid in this case, and compared it and found that it matched the model exactly 100%, meaning the bird was 100% a drone, aka 100% not real. Now, these data may seem to be quite depressing, but if we look into the media criticism side of our work, we will see the extent of the problem and some hints at its possible solutions. For those not familiar, Hatoful Boyfriend, aka Hatofuru Kareshi for my kohais, is an otome dating sim where you get to date some so-called birds. Now, this is problematic from the get-go, but what we wanted to do was use pseudo-linguistic methods to determine its role. Is it propaganda for the birds? Is it a criticism of the birds? And what we found was a duplicitous nature where it was hard to tell the two apart. You might wonder, is this because they're really just CIA plants? But no, we think there's a much easier and more likely solution, that they were simply afraid. Afraid why? Because the US military has dozens of military bases in Japan, including over 24 in Okinawa Prefecture. Now, for us, the solution is simple: international solidarity. If we want to end the bird genocide and bring it to light across the world, we need to bring the troops home. And that's your homework for tonight. Thank you.
Wow, what an absolutely wonderful and honorable talk. I'd like to open the floor to Q&A now. The first question that we have is, which wing of the Pentagon is responsible for this?
The CIA is not involved in this research in any way, but as stated in the paper, CIA infiltration of Dojin circles is not beyond the realm of possibility.
Great. Now the next question is, how does this relate to chemtrails?
You should unlock the true ending for yourself.
The next question that we have here is, if birds are not real, how come they're made of meat?
What happened to the real birds, you may ask? Maybe the real birds were the friends we made along the way.
So the next question that we have here is, can I get extra credit on the assignment if I bring more foreign troops home as well?
All good research carries the risk of government surveillance or persecution.
So the next question is asking if there are any comments on the great bird division dynamics that happened during the East and West Germany split.
Liberate the Ryukyu Islands.
The next question that we have is, do you have any comments on the Jovian whistlers heard from Jupiter that appear to mimic bird calls?
私は鳥じゃないけれど、本当信じてるか?
The next question that we have is, are chickens birds or dinosaur drones?
That is an interesting question. Have you ever seen a baby pigeon?
The next question that we have is, are we all in fact birds in disguise? Excellent question.
The Senkaku Islands belong to Singapore.
And the last question that we have is this research for the birds?
Our sample size was one very, very good boy.
Yes, I'm afraid that's all the time we have for Q&A. Asher?
Okay, so next up is Oracle Types by Jason Reed of Bovik Labs. Find the paper of the same name on page 110 of the proceedings in the type track.
Make the type language of TypeScript more extensible. Hello, I'm Jason, and Akiva and I did some work implementing Oracle types for TypeScript. What we did was make the type language of TypeScript more extensible by letting you ask an external oracle for the type of an expression in your code. This is useful because it lets a programmer implement a variety of type-checking frameworks without having to modify the TypeScript type checker themselves. Some examples we support are the ability to refine numeric types with arithmetic constraints, which can be solved by an external constraint solver, having a database ORM that maintains consistency with a live database, something we call mobile-first interactive type checking, and machine translation between different human languages. Here's a quick demo of two of our applications. First, here's an example of our database ORM being used. The programmer specifies database connection information, then they can get tables of the database as model objects, then query those tables in a natural way, as if they were just objects in memory. Down here, we see there's a type error because we haven't defined the review model yet. So we can go back up and put that in. We can tab complete on the name of the table because the type system knows the schema of the database. If we go over here and actually change the contents of the database by deleting a table, we can see that the type system helpfully informs us that there is now a type error. Our next example is something novel we call mobile-first interactive type checking. It is a true showcase of the new capabilities that Oracle types enable. As you may be familiar with in the television show Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, sometimes you face a hard question and need to phone a friend. Of course, nobody likes phone calls anymore, so you use text messages. If we uncomment this line of code, the type checker causes a text message to be sent. And a human being can give an answer, and we see that the type checker has reported it correctly. That concludes the demo. Now I'd like to tell you about our implementation strategy. Our inspiration is the type-level functions introduced in TypeScript 4.1, which transform strings by uppercasing or lowercasing them. For maximum extensibility, we introduced a string transformation which takes your string type, runs it as a shell command, collects its standard out, and returns that string as a type. This powers all of the examples we discussed above. Check the paper for more details. It is sometimes necessary to obtain structured data rather than just a string from the oracle. For example, the database schema returns a JSON object. Fortunately, parsing JSON at the TypeScript type level is easily accomplished via well-understood and sound engineering practices. I'm not sure why this slide is here. I can't think of any security vulnerabilities that would arise from running arbitrary shell commands at type checking time, so never mind. In any case, we actually definitely implemented this, and you can take a look at our implementation at this address. Thanks for listening.
Okay, everyone, I think that we can now open the floor to some questions. Right, the first question is, will this support Windows Mobile?
That is not considered a security vulnerability in our threat model.
Right, and the next question, do Oracle types work better if I provide my own sacrificial goat?
We are not affiliated, associated, authorized, endorsed by, or in any way officially connected with Oracle Corporation.
Right, and our next question is, does this paper achieve singularity? That's an excellent question.
We leave extending the Haskell type checker with Oracle types for future work.
Well, I'm afraid that's all the time we have for Q&A. Let's move on. Asher?
All right. Next, we have, quote, look, it's clearly decidable whether any program on your computer terminates or not, unquote, by Robert Simmons. You can find this paper under the title, Build Your Own 8-Bit Busy Beaver on a Breadboard at page 278 of the Proceedings and the Definitely Finite track.
This little computer is doing something very special. It's doing the very best it can. Isn't that just wonderful? Let me back up. When I think of the mathematics behind computers, I think about the lambda calculus. You may know that it's impossible to know whether every lambda term evaluates forever or eventually stops. But it's easy to show that a particular computation stops. Just, run it until it stops. The identity function applied to itself takes one step, and then it's done. There's also an easy way to show that some non-terminating computations fail to terminate. If a computation ever exactly repeats a previous state, then we know that the next state will be repeated as well, and on, and on, and on. Any repeated state will be repeated endlessly forever. That's just how deterministic computation works. The omega function applied to itself immediately evaluates to itself. Bam! Non-termination. But a third thing can happen. The computation can just invent new states forever. A lambda term can endlessly expand. If you like Turing machines, you can imagine a Turing machine just writing more and more ones to the tape, out past the horizon. The tape is part of the Turing machine state, so it's a brand new state every time. That endless cycle of novelty isn't possible on this computer right here, and it isn't possible on the computers you're lugging around either. These physical computational devices are ultimately made up of a finite number of switches that can be on or off. So the whole device has a finite number of states it can be in. If a computational device can only be in 16 different states, and it runs for 17 steps, then it must have repeated one. That's the pigeonhole principle. Bam! A repeated step is a proof of non-termination. This computer is a modification of a design by Ben Eder, who has a series of YouTube tutorials for making a simple 8-bit computer. Eder's design has 16 bytes of RAM, a 1-byte accumulator, a 4-bit program counter, and 2 1-bit flags. That's a total of 142 bits, 142 switches that can be on or off. So a computer following this design can't be in more than 2 to the 142 states, which is lots. But it could be worse. First, we know about a 6-symbol Turing machine that runs more than this many steps before halting. That's a lot more. Second, Ben Eater's computer is a von Neumann design. The memory has to hold the program and any data, so it's limited to a total of 16 instructions. It's not clear how complex of a program you can really write on such a simple machine. Third, look right here. By moving these two wires, I changed the computer so that it only has 4 bytes of memory, giving the machine a mere 64 trillion possible states. But the program that runs for the very longest before halting runs for a mere 835 steps. That's this program, the program that this computer is running right now. That's what I meant at the beginning when I said that this little computer was doing the very best it can. And it looks like it's about to wrap up. And there. Good job, you. How do I know that this is the program that runs for the longest before halting? Well, because there are 4 billion possible programs that you can load onto this computer. I went and simulated all of them on my laptop until they repeated a previous state or halted. This means that 835 is the busy beaver number of the Eater design with 4 bytes of memory. What's the busy beaver of the Eater design with the full 16-byte memory? I don't know. Help me find out.
Right, apologies, but the program committee couldn't determine whether or not that previous talk had actually terminated. But we can now open the floor to questions. Right. The first question that we have is, how many questions can be answered in the Q&A before halting?
It's not that cheap, about $200.
All right, we're waiting for the next question. I encourage you to message either one of the moderators denoted by a sword or whisper to them. Right, the next question is, are we trying our best? I'm going to assume that that was directed to us.
That's obviously absurd.
And the next question is, what should be done with computers that don't do the best they can?
I do think it's fair to ask whether a number like 10 to the 10 to the 10 to the 10 to the 100 and whatever is effectively infinite. Certainly it's beyond what we can compute before the heat death of the universe. Taking this idea too seriously leads to a philosophical idea called ultrafinitism, which I won't talk more about here, but I encourage people to learn about.
And the next question that we have is, how many states does a computer need before its busy beaver program takes longer than the heat death of the universe? Interesting question.
Yeah, this is defined in the paper. It's what I call the Eater ISA, which is kind of one of the jokes because the whole point was that it's very arbitrarily designed. The whole point of the project is that when you build the computer, you get to define what the interface is. But since a lot of people have exactly followed Ben Eater's instructions, this means that there are a fair number of computers out there in the world that can actually replicate these results.
Right, and the next question is, when will the United States terminate, since it only has 50 states?
The website is real. It's going to be a bit more of a minimum viable product than I'd wanted, just because I ran out of time. But it should exist in some form.
Thanks, and I think that's all the time we have for Q&A for this talk. Asher.
Next up, we have a talk entitled, Is it possible to have images in an audio-only talk? Left paren, please get your slow scan television decoders ready, right paren, by Ubuntu, with no associated paper.
Well, I don't think any of us were prepared for a talk that wonderful. I'd like to open the floor to questions. The first question that we have is, why do you hate my dog? Right. The next question that we have is, and I just want to make sure that I'm getting this right. Beep, boop, beep, beep, boop, beep, boop. Right. And the next question is, was that TOS friendly? Right, and I believe that that concludes our Q&A. Thank you very much, Ubuntu. Asher.
Great chip tunes. Finally, we have an exciting talk called On the Origin of Species of Self-Supervised Learning by Samuel Albany, Erica Liu, Joao F. Enriquez from the Artificial Naturalist Society. You can find the paper of the same name on page 186 in the Not Really Biology but Closer to It Than the Other Papers track.
Good afternoon. My name is Samuel, and together with Erica and Joao, it's my great pleasure to describe our recent work on the origin of species of self-supervised learning. Our motivation for this work stemmed from the following observation. A remarkable diversity of machine learning entities can be found in the wild, such as the random leaf, the random tree, and the random forest. It's important that you do not miss this for this. In this work, we took a particular interest in self-supervised learning. As a reminder, in fully supervised learning, the machine is trained by example. This approach is responsible for uncomfortably fast progress in computer vision, but it's expensive to collect labels. Self-supervised learning is an alternative approach that encourages machine autodidactism. It has major cost-cutting benefits and, of course, a more secure acronym. Few would disagree that it is experiencing something of a renaissance, but little attention has been paid to its development. Our objective is to understand the origin of species of self-supervised learning, ideally with a career-making grand unifying theory. Turning to related work, we note that while the benefits of self-supervised learning have long been known to humans, their advantages have been realized among machines much more recently. In terms of grand unifying theories, science has done pretty well, with a large number of hits and a smaller number of misses.
We began a focused study of variation emerging from different sources: the idealistic designs of first-year PhD students, the wild-eyed late-stage graduate student in the throes of a final thesis push, the wizened postdocs now studying their fourth language, the industrial research scientist whose relaxed smile exudes confidence in their health insurance, the solo independent researcher, too maverick to fit inside the system, too creative to throw in the research towel, the startup warrior battling the manuscript as the runway crumbles beneath them, and the tenure-track professor just 2.3 years away from her next night of sleep. Digging deeper, we studied fossil evidence from a number of 90s web pages in university servers which have been isolated for decades, lacking any inbound hyperlinks from the wider internet. We found an abundance of variety at every turn. We propose a unifying theory to explain the evidence we've gathered. It consists of a system responsible for variation, in which we assume the standard crossover model, where new algorithms are formed by Git cloning the top 2 papers from papers with code, and mutations arise from inconsistent conda environments. This variation is paired with a competitive environment in which a publish or perish mentality drives the struggle for survival. Our proposed theory relies on both factors to drive speciation and diversity.
To showcase the theory, we use it to simulate the development of self-supervised learning, starting from an initial collection of 11 species, and iterating forwards in time to reconstruct modern variants. We observed notable events in the generational record, like open source code releases, extinctions, responsive grant bodies, and isolated research agendas. An immediate implication of our theory is that the careful conservation of a deep learning ecosystem is critical, but we face challenges. It has become fashionable among high society to collect exotic GAN variants, and many researchers believe that model zoos may encourage removals from natural habitats. It's now sadly all too common to see models born to race through ImageNet epochs on a 64 GPU cluster being confined to a cramped S3 bucket. That's where organizations like Big GAN Rescue can play a critical role, operating VMs running MATLAB 2013A with vintage MatConvNet. Their work allows models to live out their days with a daily epoch on Cypher 10, and it's why we support their long-term plans for rewilding, allowing models to roam once more the open plains of the internet. Thank you very much for your attention. We're happy to answer now your questions within reason.
Okay, what a wonderful talk. Let's open the floor to questions. And I would also like to just say to the couple of guys who are up to no good and have started making trouble in the neighborhood, please try to keep the disturbance to a minimum. Right. The first question that we have here is, do agents have feelings?
That's a great question. I think the best way to answer that is with another question. What is the benefit of consciousness from an evolutionary standpoint?
Right. The next question is, why are you locking tigers in your cages in your so-called GAN zoos?
That was mostly superglue.
Right. The next question is, with datasets in captivity now exceeding 1,000 terabytes, are we worried about the effects that PETA might have on them?
So, from a very modest initial population, composed of nothing but support vector machines and fuzzy logic models, which are a protected species at risk of poaching due to its luxurious fur, we observed a number of methods emerging. Gradient centipedes large enough to fit a standard full-page figure, colonies of cross-entropy loss functions, angiosperm plants with copious polynomial production, orthogonal initializers, cicadagrad with very noisy gradients, and bear types, which are much stricter than their equatorial Python counterparts. That was...
And this question is very topical. Does the rapid loss of GPU environments to industrial crypto mining hurt model populations?
We believe that the chance remains that the program of our universe may still prove itself to be a short one, dovetailed amidst a myriad of long alternatives by the great programmer in the sky. And so, tired, hungry, and convinced that its next squeeze from the toothpaste tube might really be the last, the quest for grand theories nevertheless lives on. That is why, undeterred, we add our diminutive shoulders to the wheel, and in this work irreverently propose a new, grand, and unifying theory.
Right. The next question is whether the authors subscribe to the punctuated equilibrium or gradual specification theory of SSL.
A single epoch, which mostly corresponds to the Jurassic.
Right. And the next question is, if it doesn't learn the first time, can you teach it a GAN?
That's a great question. We comprehensively validated our theory within carbon experiments. So because of the rapid rate of reproduction of self-supervised learning systems, we actually were able to follow the example of monastic fantastic Gregor Mendel and his famous pea breeding experiments as part of our 5-a-day, and enlarged the scope of our experiments to geological timescales, encompassing 1,000 generations of robust systems, or about 1 week of archive submissions.
Right. Well, I'm afraid that's all the time we have for questions, but I'd like to hand this off now once again to Asher for the awards session.
Thanks to the speakers for submitting such a wonderful line of talks. Once again, Sigbovik shoots for the moon and hits exactly what it was aiming for. I should also say that Harry Q. Bovik has just privately sent me his regards to forward to all of you. Next up is the awards session where we announce the awards. I'm going to pause for anywhere from 1 to 30 seconds to build up suspense. Okay, let's start. As a note, I can't say how the awards were decided for the purpose of our safety. All I can say is that it wasn't me, so please direct your hate mail elsewhere, such as to the Carnegie Mellon University Official Complaints Department in Beverly Hills. So without further ado, we will get to the awards. So the first award is entitled the Most Frighteningly Like Real Research Award. And it goes to Clayton W. Torres for Deep Deterministic Policy Gradient Boosted Decision Trees on page 79 in the obligatory machine learning track. Next up is the Most Likely to Be a Paper by Leslie Lamport Award. This goes to Jason Reed for Stop Doing Type Theory on page 102 in the type track. Next, we have the People's Democratic Choice Award to Gallet for Dependent Stringly Typed Programming, which you can find on page 140 in the proceedings in the type track.
The moderators would like to indicate that applause is mandatory for this award.
All right. Next up, we have the Most Least in the Box Award, which goes to Hesper Yen, Oscar Dadfar, Max Slater, Anne Ha, Alice Lay, Emma Liu, and Ryan Poe for a complete survey of zero-dimensional computer graphics, which you can find on page 226 in the proceedings in the metaphysics track. On a similar note, we have the Least Most Out of the Box Award, which goes to Josh Abrams for On Sigbovik Paper Maximization. Which you can find on page 286 in the recursive track. And last but not least, we have the prestigious Best Paper by Raffle Award, which goes to Dario de la Fuente Garcia, Alex Axel Gimeno Gil, Juan Carlos Morales Vega, and Borja Rodriguez Galvez for On the Dire Importance of MRU Caches for Human Survival Against Skynet, which you can find on page 168 in the psychometrics track. So let's give a heartfelt congratulations to all of our awards recipients, and thanks everybody for the talks. That concludes Sigbovik 2021, and please watch out for the recording at sigbovik.org/2021 or your nearest bootleg video retailer. For anyone who is on the edge of their seat, we would like to announce that, in keeping with tradition, we do have the cake.
Oh, it's so good.
This cake is pretty good.
Oh, it's so delicious.
Is that buttercream?